All right, Julie, thank you very much. More money for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan in NASA's planned trip to the moon grounded. We are talking about this, which I can barely lift. 4 volumes weighing in at more than 10 pounds. President Obama's proposed $3.8 trillion budget. It raises the deficit to a record $1.6 trillion. Okay, Representatives Cynthia Lummis and Gerry Connolly are both on the House Budget Committee. They both join us this morning to weigh in, literally, on the president's plan. I'm sure you have this committed to memory entirely, both of you, right? Word for word, everything there. It's, I'll put that down because it's a little bit of a workout. We're talking $3.8 trillion. We're also talking a record deficit. You have the chance today to talk with the White House Budget Director to get a better idea to some of the questions that you may have. As these talks now move through Congress, what do we expect? And I'll start with you, Representative Lummis, because you're closest to me. What are Republicans feeling now initially upon receipt of the budget?
Well, we're hopeful that the president will follow through with his State of the Union remarks that he made last week about freezing domestic spending with discussions on entitlement reform, because the fact is discretionary spending is only about 13% of the budget. So that means we're not touching 87% of the budget. It continues to grow exponentially. And this year's budget is a reflection of that. This year's budget is bigger than last year's budget, and last year's budget was the biggest budget in the history of the world.
It's certainly been a big point of contention among Republicans, the curbing spending versus stopping spending. And also, you know, there's a lot in here, quite frankly, that was put through Congress last year that didn't make it through. What do you expect, Congressman Connolly, that will make it through, that will get cut as we go through the process here with Congress?
Well, there are a number of us on the Democratic side of the aisle who are quite seized with the issue of the deficit and the need to have fiscal restraint. And, you know, I think on that subject, you can find some cooperation across the aisle, even though, unfortunately, we didn't see that in the Senate when they had the opportunity to pass a bipartisan commission. So I think we've got to focus on the deficit. But we also have to focus on the investments that are going to be necessary to help the economy recover at an accelerated pace. The key to reducing deficits is economic growth. Federal revenue fell in this time period from 20% of GDP, gross domestic product, which is historically what it's been, to 14.8%. So that dramatic drop in revenue has helped really fuel a lot of the deficits as we look especially to the out years.
One of the keys has been trying to protect the middle class. That's what President Obama campaigned on. That's what he's trying to do here. Can you continue to reduce the deficit, though, without reaching in and putting some type of tax or some effect on the middle class?
Well, certainly I don't favor what President Obama has proposed in this budget with respect to tax increases for certain income levels and the curtailing of tax deductions at certain income levels. That would certainly hurt most of my constituents in Northern Virginia. I think that's an unwise thing to do, especially given the fragility of both the economy and the national recovery in the real estate market.
Mm-hmm. Is it the spending? Is it really the spending that's the key for the Republicans as far as key opposition?
Definitely. Spending is the key. And so I was encouraged that when last week Republicans met with the president at our planning retreat in Baltimore, that he engaged with Paul Ryan, the ranking member of the Budget Committee, on the issue of entitlement changes. Entitlement programs are what is the big driver in these massive budget increases. And unless we begin to address entitlement spending, we're not going to make the dent in spending that we need to in order to allow the private sector to flourish. And right now, the private sector is being crowded out of the economy by government spending.
I know one of the keys is we look at the unemployment rate, which is still expected to be at about 10%, if maybe a little bit under that by the end of the year, but right around that 10% mark. Obviously, with your role on the Budget Committee, former treasurer for Wyoming, you're pretty good at looking at numbers and where we go from here. How do you see this now, if this passes through now, affecting things in the long term if we look 2, 3, 4 years down the road?
$2 trillion worth of tax increases over 10 years are the assumptions upon which this budget is based. So this budget sends us in the wrong direction, which is more spending rather than less spending. And we really need to get a handle on the 87% of the economy that's not addressed in the president's proposal.
Do you want to respond?
Yes, I do. I think we're going to have a vigorous debate about this. Neither Cynthia nor I were in the Congress when, frankly, record deficits were handed to us by 3 consecutive Republican Congresses and an 8-year Republican administration, creating one of the largest deficits in American history after inheriting a surplus. 4 consecutive years of budget surpluses. Okay, so that's what we inherit. But I think it's very important when we look at proposals like Mr. Ryan's proposal, who's the ranking Republican on the Budget Committee. I agree with Cynthia, we have to get our arms around entitlement reform. But his alternative plan would abolish, privatize Social Security and abolish Medicare and replace it with a voucher system. I don't think my seniors think that's a great idea.
Yeah, obviously big changes. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But real quick before we do, what do you expect the tone to be in the meeting today with Budget Director Peter Orszag?
Well, I hope it's not what it has been, which is Democrats entrenching themselves to defend the president, Republicans entrenching themselves to attack this big spending, big government agenda. I hope we'll finally get past that about who's to blame for past overspending and finally start to look forward to say, what can we do about this in the future?
Agree or disagree?
Well, I certainly hope that will be the spirit. It hasn't been in the past, but this is a budget that has some very useful investments at a very difficult time, but it also has some very problematic suggestions that some of us on the Democratic side certainly can't support.
All right, we'll be following you guys throughout the day today. I know you have a busy day, but we thank you for coming in this morning. Congressman Gerry from Virginia and Congresswoman Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming. Thanks. Allison.
All right, thank you so much, Steve. Time